Hello, AP European students. Today, this lesson is going to be on the European Voyages of Discovery, which is section 2 of chapter 14. You're going to write down everything that's in red and maybe even some things that aren't in red to help you fill in your notes and understand this content better. Today's lesson, a lot of it may be review from 5th grade, 7th grade. These are some of the names that you've heard before as a part of exploration, but some things are also going to be new. So feel free to watch the video again or pause it to get your notes correctly as we go through today. Okay, we're starting off with this very simplified map showing us the great distance the Romans and others had to go to get goods from the Middle East, from the Indies, and of course China and the Spice Islands. Now the travel time alone, not to mention the dangers of traveling both the roads and the waterways shown on this map, but just the sheer distance that these goods had to travel made them extremely expensive. Things like ginger, cinnamon, pepper. These are things that the average common European was not going to be able to have access to simply because of the price. These things were reserved for high nobility and kings. Looking at this map, kind of focusing more on Europe and the Middle Ages time period, a lot of this trade had to function around Italy. They were the Venetian and Genoese merchants were supplying the money for the Renaissance, and a lot of the trade routes that you see here are focused around the Mediterranean Sea and even above that going around the Iberian Peninsula to England and even north of that. The causes of European expansion. So we're going to look at some of the reasons why the Europeans, one of the things in Europe that we see during the mid-14th century, or I'm sorry, the mid-15th century, around 1450, is the social boom and the economic boom. So there was a population boom, there was a revival in the economy and economic activity in Europe, and this created a situation where average people were going to want to have access to more luxury items. Things that were considered non-essentials before became available to them, and so this put a demand on these types of goods. You see the photograph of the statue here. You have Prince Henry, the navigator right here. We call him the navigator not because he actually navigated ships and was a sailor, but he was a prince who funded navigations. And all of these guys that are lined up behind him give us a sense of the different types of people and purposes or motivations that Europeans were looking outside of their borders too. You see an artist, you see various people here. You got a knight here who is kneeling in full armor. You have explorers, you have clergy, and all these different types of people. This monument is in Lisbon, Portugal, which is the capital of Portugal, commemorating its explorers. The economic cause, of the search, for a better route to Asia, really, you have a lot of trade going through the Middle East. Well, in 1453, the fall of Constantinople and the loss of that trade route being controlled by the Muslims, it shot prices way up, and the European Christians were not so fond of dealing with them and began to say, wouldn't it be nice if we could just go completely around? Okay. One of the religious motivations that we see with Ferdinand and Isabella's successful Reconquista, concluding with Granada in 1492, expelling all of the Muslims out of the Iberian Peninsula, it really relit the crusading spirit that the common person became very excited about missionary work, became very excited about taking the message of Christianity to other people groups around the world. This guy over here kind of played into the religious motivation. There was a myth about this king, this very rich Christian ruler, believed to be in India, ruling a vast, wealthy kingdom in the heathen Orient. And so this myth was birthed during the Middle Ages time period, and there was kind of this folklore, this kind of cultural obsession with finding this guy and finding this Christian kingdom in the Far East. With exploration, the easiest way to really categorize the motivations are the 3 G's of exploration and discovery. So we know about the religious motivations, we know about the economic motivations. This one here, the motivation of glory, is really a combination of, yes, they were seeking fame, but they were also just seeking the unknown, a desire for discovery, both for recognition and just plain curiosity, was a prevailing idea in the Renaissance in Europe, and would later this desire for curiosity and to have that curiosity known is really going to launch the Age of Enlightenment and the scientific revolution later. Okay. The next section talks about some conquistadors, so you need to make sure that you have the definition for exactly who those guys were. Bartholomew Diaz was a Portuguese explorer, and he said that his mission was to serve God and His Majesty, to give light to those who were in darkness, and to grow rich, as all men desire to do. Vasco da Gama, another Portuguese sailor, said that when he was asked about what his motivation was, he said, Christians and spices. And of course, Hernando Cortez, which we'll look at him in a little bit, he said, I have come to win gold, not plow fields like a peasant. The cause of European expansion, looking at the monarch's motivation. This guy is Prince Henry here. Prince Henry the Navigator, and he financed a lot of expeditions along the African coastline. They were looking for, here's Lisbon right here, if you look at the map, and they were looking for a way to get around Africa. They would have to travel a great distance, a lot farther than they had originally thought, and they're going to do it at some point, but Prince Henry was the big factor in financing a lot of these trips to try and get around Africa and find a quicker way to the east. The sailor's life, when you look at what these guys put up with on the ship, it was pretty dreadful. You know, they're sharing their space with livestock. They had to deal with rats and lice, and sometimes long periods with little food and no space. And they weren't well paid. So a lot of these guys, you say, well, why in the world would they sign up for this? Here's some reasons that you can write down in your notes. Maybe they were escaping poverty, you know. Maybe, you know, they would rather take their chances with these adverse conditions rather than face poverty, maybe homelessness, maybe starvation back at home. A lot of the guys wanted to find adventure. A lot of the guys wanted to escape a criminal record. Maybe they needed a new start, a chance for riches. The 3 G's definitely apply to everybody from the highest, if they're funding the search, or if they're the lowest sailor on the boat. The God, glory, and gold motivations for exploration. So we have to talk about technology. It really got better during this time and allowed the travel quicker, faster, more efficient, and in a better way. So the ship here that you see is called a caravel. This was a change from the galley ships of the ancient world in the Middle Ages. They were lighter, more maneuverable. They had sturdy rudders to hold up in the Atlantic, in the open ocean, to deal with the wind and the squalls that were much bigger in the open ocean. And the angular shape of their sails allowed these light caravel ships to sail into the wind. Okay, so they're going to be a lot easier to maneuver. They needed a smaller crew to be able to maneuver, and they became the transportation of choice. Columbus actually had 2 of these caravels out of his 3 ships that he sails to the New World in 1492. Map making also got better. Ptolemy's geography, interestingly enough, way back in the 2nd century BC, now, they knew that the Earth was round. They had no idea how large it was, but they knew it was round. And so Muslim scholars reintroduced this map in the mid-15th century, and along with this map and modern exploration in the direction it was going, helped mariners eventually develop the Mercator projection, which gives us an accurate sailing picture and proportioned continents. Now, obviously, they didn't go from one to the other overnight, but again, Ptolemy's geography was a major building block to creating these modern maps that we rely on today. Okay, navigation aids were also a major deal. Being able to plot their latitude with the astrolabe, the invention of the magnetic compass that had been used for quite some time by Arab travelers and Arab seamen. It was then used by Europeans later on. Okay, it says in the notes here, sometimes people were used as navigation aids. We'll talk about Vasco da Gama and how he picks up an Indian pilot on the east coast of Africa to head over to India to show him the way. So, looking at the Portuguese, we said that these are the first guys out the gate, and they had the navigation tools. And where are they going to go? Well, they're going to try to head around Africa to get where they're going. They went down, they went out, we've got the islands here, and we see that they're even going to go farther and farther, and it is going to be a Portuguese sailor that runs into the coast of Brazil in South America. Okay, Portugal, you say, why Portugal first, is really blocked from getting to Europe by Spain, so the land routes are not an option for Portugal, and so the Portuguese developed ship building and ship technology and kind of a comfortability with sailing before a lot of the other European nations do. And in 1415, Portugal takes Ceuta in Morocco, and this date in 1415 marks the beginning of European expansion overseas. The Azores are colonized in 1427 and forward from there. Okay, trade and exploration. The gold-rich Guinea coast by 1500, Portugal had controlled 100% of African gold by this time. Okay, by the year 1500, Diaz is going to sail to the Cape of Good Hope, and by 1487 he's going to get to the very bottom of Africa, and his crew is actually going to mutiny, and they're going to turn around and come home. Vasco da Gama gets to the bottom, the Cape of Good Hope, and make it up the eastern. You can see this as Vasco da Gama here, 1497. He makes it all the way up to eastern Africa, picks up his India pilot, and then heads over to Calicut and Goa, okay, by 1497. So these two guys are the first ones to really go, reach the southernmost tip of Africa and then make it over to India. And this is where we'll pause, and we'll pick up part 2 in the second video.